are you located?
Richmond.
Where?
Richmond.
Richmond, okay. I've been a speaker at IONS twice in Richmond, and I love the group. I love the people. They're just fabulous, and quite a few of them have been to our place also. Monaco, thinking.
Check. Check.
Yes, ma'am? Yeah, we're good.
I can hear Tom.
Or Dan.
Hi, Dan.
Well, is it on? I'm speaking. I hear it now.
I hear you.
All right, good. Is this mic up here when it's on, or can we move this?
It's on. You can move it if you want to.
It's not going to be a problem for having two? Oh, yeah, Don. Okay.
Yeah, I see.
Right, okay. Well, let's see if we can. Somebody mentioned a drum roll will have to do with. Are we ready? Yeah. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And thank you for coming. We've got. Are we on Zoom now, Dan? Fully operational. The miracle of technology. I promised in my email that went out that all the technology issues were resolved. So, so let's hope that from here on it'll be smooth sailing. I'd like to welcome everyone to our monthly IONS meeting of the Richmond, Central Virginia IONS Community Group. My name is Tom Coates. Like Alexis Orba, I have other names if you prefer. And we are a member of a community group of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, headquartered in Petaluma, California, which was founded in 1973. Okay, all right, and by Edgar Mitchell. Edgar Mitchell was the lunar landing module pilot for Apollo 14, and like many of those folks, or several of those folks who walked on the moon back in the 1970s, he had his own takeaway from the experience on the way back to Earth. When he saw the Earth as a pale blue dot, he had a unity consciousness experience, and he decided to dedicate the rest of his life to exploring the frontiers of consciousness, especially the interface between science and spirit. And so IONS was created as a vehicle for that purpose almost 50 years ago, and it's done a really wonderful job. And in the time of COVID, it has become more interactive with the public by having weekly internet programs that are accessed on Zoom. And I would encourage anyone who's listening to me or anyone in our group to consider becoming a member of IONS itself. And the dues are relatively nominal, and the benefits are great. We in Richmond have been lucky to have a group going now for we're going into our 26th anniversary next month in January. We began in January of 1996 and have been putting on monthly programs ever since then. We've been blessed in many ways in that we've had wonderful speakers through the years, and we've had a very solid following. The COVID period has proven to be challenging in a variety of ways. We were on Zoom only for the period from starting in March or April of 2020 until this past June, when we were able to reopen in person, and we've continued on Zoom and in person since then. And so we've been blessed to be able to do it. We know that there's a lot of COVID fatigue, and there's also a lot of COVID fear, and people are staying at home in droves, which I'm not, because of their fear of contracting COVID, and I don't blame them for that. But we urge people to continue supporting our group. We think we're doing some good things, and we'd like to continue as long as we can. I also will mention that we have in the room here, we have a basket for love offerings that we pass around, and so we ask you to, I've put some chum in it to encourage people to be generous, and so we ask you to reach into your wallet and into your heart and bring the two together as deeply as you can in the context of the basket being put in your lap. We also ask that those online and on Zoom, if they wish to donate, we'd love to have them do so. Go online to our website, which is at richmondions.com, and there's a PayPal function on there, and you can donate as much as you want from the comfort of your home on doing that. Some people don't do online stuff and would prefer to donate by check, and that's perfectly acceptable too. All you have to do for that is to write a check payable to Richmond Ions or to our treasurer, Sally Youngs, and mail it to me at the address on the transmittal email that goes out every month. So we have all kinds of ways to allow people to make contributions, and we welcome all that are willing to do so. I think we have someone who is going to introduce our speaker today, so that the speaker doesn't have to introduce himself, and so so I've called on Donna for that. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. Can you hear me?
No. Closer. Get right on the mic. Closer.
How come he doesn't have to get on the mic?
I've got it.
Oh, you cheat. Golly, he cheats. Can you hear me now? Because I can't hear my voice. I am just such a good speaker. Okay. Into the mic, okay. I wondered how he could do it and I couldn't. Now I can hear my voice. Such a genius he is.
I'm wearing one.
I know, I see that now. No, I would tell you, Tom greeted me at the door today and asked me to introduce the speaker, and I had this moment of panic. I said, oh my God, who is it? And he calmly looked at me. I said, oh my God, it's you. Okay, I'll do it. So listen, bear with me, because this is his resume. I'm going to read it and understand that it's only like 25% of Tom. He's quite a guy. Okay, let me see. The presenter. Tom Coates is a Richmond-based lawyer who has represented numerous spiritually oriented and public interest groups throughout his career. He actually does a lot of business law too, and everything else. He was a co-founder of Richmond Ikoji Buddhist Shanghai in 1985 and has been a member and contributor of the Richmond Ions chapter since its formation in 1996. He is actually the last remaining of the 3 gentlemen who started this organization, so we honor him. In his spare time, he enjoys reading, creative writing, painting, I'm going off the grid here, painting, woodworking, alpine skiing, biking, backpacking, sailing, time travel, metaphysics, and relaxing with his family at their ancient Outer Banks beach cottage and their Appalachian mountain retreat. I want to be part of this family. What are you doing next weekend, Tom? He is very pleased to respect that his most
Report.
Wait, he is very pleased to report. See, he's correcting me already. That his most significant previously unfilled ambition of this lifetime is to make love to an I can't say it, extraterrestrial female. Well, I'm going to say something else. That wish has now been fulfilled. And this is still church. I introduce you Tom for his annual greeting meeting.
Thank you very much, Donna. And by the way, I can't be the speaker and pass this too, so someone's going to have to pass the basket as we... Well, you can wait a minute, Robert. I'm going to do a meditation right now. Right, exactly. I'm going to ask everyone to relax. We're going to start with a little opening meditation, and I'm going to ask everyone to get their feet solidly on the floor. Take a couple of deep breaths. Close your eyes. This is what many of you have experienced with me before. It's a Tonglen meditation used in Mahayana Buddhism. Picture or visualize someone you know and love who is going through much suffering, an illness, a loss, depression, pain, anxiety, fear. And as you breathe in, imagine all that person's suffering in the form of dark, black, smoke-like, tar-like, thick, heavy clouds, entering your nostrils and traveling down into your heart. Hold that suffering in your heart. Then on your out-breath, take all of your peace, your freedom, your health, your goodness, and virtue, and send it out to that person in the form of healing, liberating light. Imagine they take it all in and feel completely free, released, and happy. Do that for several breaths. Let's do it for 3 breaths on that person. Then imagine the town or city that person is in or lives in. And on the in-breath, take in all of the suffering of that town or city and send back all of your health and happiness to everyone in it. On three breaths in the same way as for the person who is suffering. Then imagine the entire state that person is in. And repeat the same process. As you breathe in, imagine all that state suffering in the form of dark, black, smoke-like, tar-like, thick, heavy clouds entering your nostrils and traveling down into your heart. Hold that suffering in your heart, and then on the out-breath, take all your peace, freedom, health, goodness, and virtue, and send it out to everyone in that state in the form of healing, liberating light. Then imagine the entire country that person is in. If it's in the United States, the whole United States. As you breathe in, imagine all of the suffering in the entire country in the form of dark, black, smoke-like, tar-like, thick, and heavy clouds entering your nostrils, traveling down into your heart. Hold that suffering in your heart. Then on the out-breath, take all of your peace, freedom, health, goodness, and virtue, and send it out to the entire state, the entire country in the form of healing, liberating light. Imagine the entire country taking it all in, feeling completely free, released, and happy. Do that for 3 breaths. Then imagine the entire planet, all of planet Earth. As you breathe in, imagine all of the planet Earth suffering in the form of dark, black, smoke-like, tar-like, thick, heavy clouds entering your nostrils and traveling down into your heart. Hold that suffering in your heart, and then on the out breath, take all of your peace, freedom, health, goodness, and virtue, and send it out to the entire planet in the form of healing, liberating light. Imagine the planet takes it all in, and all the people on the planet, and all the beings of every kind on the planet Earth, feeling completely free, released, and happy, and joyful. Do that for 3 breaths. Then imagine the entire universe, all of creation. As you breathe in, imagine all of creation suffering in the form of dark, black, smoke-like, tar-like, thick, heavy clouds entering your nostrils and traveling down into your heart. Hold that suffering in your heart. Then on the out breath, take all of your peace, freedom, health, goodness, and virtue, and send it out to the entire universe, all of creation, in the form of healing, liberating light. Imagine everything in the universe takes it all in and feels completely free, released, happy, and joyful. Do that for 3 breaths. Now that we have cleansed and liberated everything in creation, including ourselves, we take a couple more breaths, relax, open your eyes, and come back to where we are. Sometimes in that Tonglen exercise, which I think is personally one of the nicest meditations I know, people will get nauseous when they take in all that, imagine all that suffering of others, which simply means it's working. It means that you actually are fully engaging in the process, and so not to worry if that is the case. I was looking around for my notes this morning, with which I not a lot for this talk. This is a talk about frameworks, and that frameworks in every form we can imagine. I gave something like this talk a week ago up at Antonia Albano and Barney Brown's wonderful retreat center called the Heartstone Retreat and Heartstone Lodge and South River Highlands Retreat Center. I would recommend anyone on planet Earth to go there. It's an absolutely magical venue, and magical things happen there all the time. I've been up there a couple of times in the past month or so, and as I was saying there last month and last week, I was invited up there to a retreat that Antonia gave in first part of November, and Antonia requested everyone who was coming to send an email introducing themselves and so forth. As I was setting about to do that, I realized that it didn't feel right to identify myself as Tom Coates, which is a framework for a personal identity, and in the context of the the retreat that Antonia was putting on, which was about her the stuff she channels of the geometries of love and so forth, and the name Tom Coates felt way too restrictive for me to even feel comfortable identifying myself with it in the context of her retreat. And so I went and attended as in the name of the pen name, which I have used for the last 30 years or so, which many of you are familiar with, is Taliesin St.Clair. And that name is one that I adopted in the early 90s in connection with writings that would seem channel that came to me through the help of my own guides and so forth. And so I've later been informed that the name actually involves names by which I have had lifetimes. Taliesin was the name of a bard and shaman in Wales in the 500s AD, and St. Clair is actually a family name, and so but the names, Taliesin was made famous by Frank Lloyd Wright. He named his house in Wisconsin by that, and he named it that because the name means light bringer, and in modern English, in the name Taliesin as applied to the Welsh bard was not his actual name. It was a name by which he became known, and it means in literal terms shining brow in Gaelic. But in any event, and St. Clair, interestingly enough, means divine light. So in the context of the things that were coming in through that name, it seemed appropriate, even though I wasn't fully informed when I adopted it about all the nuances associated with it. And but I went to this retreat that Antonia put on as Taliesin St. Clair, and it felt a whole lot better to do that. I told everyone there that it was not my legal name, and interestingly enough, no one asked me what my legal name was. I thought that was fascinating, and it was a 3-day retreat, and so it felt good. I came back, and as most of you know, I'm involved regularly with various channels, and in a channeling session, I was talking about it, and I thought, I really was having a hard time with any name, and because a name itself is a framework. And when we have a name, we know we've never had a president of the United States, with the possible exception of Bill Clinton, named Bubba. And so, when we're given names, they do create a framework for our identity, and we have a role that we play associated with that framework, and names can be enhancing, they can be restrictive, and so it's good this whole process has brought to me just an awareness of that, because at a deeper level than names, we have identities that far exceed the limitations that any name we can adopt, no matter how expansive that name may be, and so I wanted to get through that. I also want to say what I always say in these talks is that we're going to go through some new information today. I don't want anyone here or anyone on Zoom to believe anything I tell you. Please do not. It's not that anything I'm telling you is untrue. I certainly don't think it is, but I don't know whether some of it's correct or not. But beliefs themselves are frameworks. They are structures of consciousness by which we gauge things, and they specifically are structures of consciousness we create for things that we do not know. And so, and we can. I became aware of this. Fortunately, I've been blessed with many contact with spirit all my life, and I continue to be blessed in ways that sometimes I feel like I don't deserve. But in any event, I have realized this at a young age, that beliefs were ideas things about which we did not know. And I realized too that from my own perspective, most of the things I'd been taught to believe from the time I was a child, I didn't think were really true. And so I started disavowing my beliefs that were imposed upon me through cultural programming and whatever. And as best I could, it's hard to get away from a lot of them. And I've been working on that ever since. And so I invite each of you here and in our Zoom audience to just take whatever I have to say here, and if it resonates, just let it percolate around in your consciousness, but don't adopt any beliefs about it. One of the things that I'm going to go through today is that we get a lot of benefit from knowing things, and more so in my judgment than we do from beliefs per se. It was mentioned, I told some stories at Antonia's last week, which I'm going to repeat today in some part. And it was mentioned by someone there that I seem to have a significant degree of knowing. And I've been, again, blessed with that throughout my life, to have a sense of knowing about how things work. And so in many ways, things that have come easy to me that in some instances don't seem that easy to others. And I would like to share that because things can be easier for us than most of us will allow. I want to begin with a story, let me mention one other thing. I can't remember what our title is today, but in last week's program it was something different than it is today, even though it's a similar program. And I gave an alternative title up there, which was not on that program up there, it's not on today's, and that is, the alternative title for today's talk is, It's All Just a Big Love Story. That's all it is. So just take that and let it percolate in your consciousness, because that's really what this is all about, and that's what our lives are all about, in my opinion. So first story I want to tell is a Bigfoot story. Bigfoot, Sasquatch, beings very close to my heart. Always have been, and I, from channeling, I've gotten that I've been training with them for most of my life to learn how to travel interdimensionally. I have no idea if that's true or not, but it rings true to me. But the story is a story that was about a Cherokee Indian in Oklahoma who was about my age, and he had a mentee who was a young man about half his age. He was in his early 30s. This fellow was in his 70s. And when this Cherokee told the story to the young man that he'd been mentoring for several years, and they were sitting around a campfire, and the Cherokee Indian was so moved by it, at times he got up and did dances and so forth, beat a drum and that sort of thing. And what he told was a story that when he was a young man, he was an avid hunter, and he did a lot of bow hunting, and because it made him feel closer to his heritage and so forth. And he had his own bow that he had made that was his favorite bow, and that he was on a hunt and had some sort of mishap and fell into a freezing river or something, and he lost consciousness and thought he was dying. And the next thing he knew, he woke up around a campfire. It was not a fire he had built, and he was around the campfire. He was the next morning after this mishap, and he was warm, and and he was covered in leaves, and he realized that he had been rescued. There was also a row of stones and sticks circling around the campfire and him, encircling him as a line of protection so that other animals would not cross that and do him harm. And he realized that his life had been saved by a Sasquatch. He had lived in an area where they were fairly plentiful, and he had a number of sightings over the years as a hunter. Never had any sense of fear or about the experiences, and always revered them as masters of the woods and so forth. And so he was quite grateful, and he realized too when he awakened that his bow was gone. That apparently the Sasquatch that had saved him had taken his bow in exchange for saving his life, which he felt was quite a fair trade, you know. And his gratitude and appreciation for having his life saved far exceeded any sense of loss about the bow. And so that had happened to the Cherokee when he was about 30 or so years old. When he was telling this story, he was about 74 or 5, and the young man was quite moved by it. And a year or so later, the young man, who had not seen his Cherokee mentor in some time, heard that his mentor had passed away. And so he went to see the family to pay his respects. And pardon me, I get a little emotional when I get to this part of it. He went to see his family to pay his respects, and what he found that when he got there, the nephew of the Cherokee said, "Oh, it's wonderful you showed up, because Uncle, whatever his name was, left something for you that he wanted you to have." So the guy went, the nephew went, and he said, "Let me go get it." So he went somewhere to get in the house to get whatever it was. He brought back this bow, and he says, "My uncle wanted me to tell you he told me that this bow that he had given this bow to a friend many years ago, and that just a day before he was passing away, the friend returned the bow, and he had never in that time seen the Sasquatch again, but the friend returned the bow, and he wanted you to have it because he knew what it would mean to you." So there, even though the Cherokee had never had another experience with a Sasquatch, the Sasquatch was watching over the man all that time. Knew he was going to pass away, brought the bow back to him so that he would have it to give away. I mean, to me, that's a wonderful story about love, you know, and even though it's not the usual Sasquatch story, it's not a scary story, but it really is a beautiful one. And that story also speaks about the framework of trust and knowing between the Cherokee and the Sasquatch. I wanted to get into a couple of other stories too. And some of you may have heard some of these. There was one that occurred when I was my late wife Christina and I was alive. We lived in a house out in Brandon, and we just moved in, and within a week or so of the time we moved in, lightning struck a tree at the end of the driveway, the largest tree in the front yard. It was a maple tree, and it wasn't knocked down, but it was clearly dead, and so we had to have it cut down, and I told her when she contacted somebody to come cut it down to have them saw the trunk of the tree in fireplace log length so that we could have some firewood, and I thought it'd be good exercise for me to have split the wood, and so she did that, and then we had the trunk of this tree across the yard, you know, for a week, and then it was 2 weeks, and then it was 3 weeks, and every week I'm getting more and more grief. When are you going to get the wood back in the back of the house, you know? And so one Sunday came, and I couldn't put it off any longer, and And she said, you got to get that back. And I said, okay, I'll do it today. And she said, when? I said, I'll go start on it right now. So I went out and stood by the tree, and all this stuff was way too big to carry, you know, and I had no means of doing it. And so I was standing there, and about 10 minutes went by, and she came out and she said, you're not doing anything. I said, oh, yes, I am. And she says, well, why aren't you moving? I said, I can't move it. I need a wheelbarrow. And she says, well, then go to Lowe's and get a wheelbarrow. I said, no, that's $140, $50. I don't want to spend that kind of, I'll only use it today. And she says, well, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm thinking maybe if I stand here a little bit, a neighbor might show up with a wheelbarrow for me. She says, but we don't know any of the neighbors. I said, well, just give it time and maybe one will show up. And so anyway, we are there like that, and all of a sudden, just as we're talking, she's, you know, saying, you know, you're really crazy. This is not the way things work. A garage door opened up about 150 feet away from where we were standing, and a guy comes out pushing a wheelbarrow, and he pushes it right over to us, and he introduces himself, and he says, it looked like to me you could use a wheelbarrow here. So she shook her head and said, okay. So anyway, I went and spent several hours, you know, using the wheelbarrow to get all the tree materials in the backyard. And so when it was all done, I was quite proud of my work, and I wanted to show off what I'd done, you know. And so I said, come on out and look how nice the yard looks now. So she came out and looked, she says, well, now we have this ugly stump out here. What are we going to do with that? And I said, well, we need a stump grinder for that, you know. And she said, what's a stump grinder? I said, well, it's a thing you back over the stump, it has teeth on it and chews the stump up. And she said, I've never heard anything like that. And I said, well, you know, that's what we need. And she said, well, where do we get a stump grinder? I said, well, why don't we stand here a minute, maybe one will show up. She says, you know, you're really crazy. Why don't you just go call somebody in the Yellow Pages? And so we're standing there another 10 seconds, and a Vietnamese guy driving a little Datsun pickup with a stump grinder behind it is driving right by. I said, wait, there's one there. And I waved to the guy, and within another 30 minutes, the stump was gone. And so, you know, if we just, the universe wants to give us what we want, you know, and so if we just let it do its work for us, it will. This is a framework of knowing how things work that helps make it happen. You know, I'm serious about that. I give you another example. There was a situation in '89. I decided to go on I was looking in January of '89 in the back of Backpacker magazine, and I saw a little blurb saying that there are only 2 contiguous 15-minute topographical maps, topos, of any mountainous areas in the lower 48 where there are no marked trails on the topos. And I thought, wow, that's got to be a great place to go for a hike. And they were in an area of Wyoming called the Wind River Range, which is south of Jackson, Wyoming. Where Yellowstone is to the north, this is the range to the south of Jackson. And so I thought, great. So this was in January. I contacted Noah out in Boulder and got a bunch of topos of the whole Wind River Range, and I got a trail book from the Sierra Club, and got my son together, and I was divorced at the time, and so we spread out the topos in my bachelor pad and looked at various hikes and so forth, and in February, and it all looked great. We also read about a fellow named Finus Mitchell, who was billed in the Sierra Club tote book as the John Muir of the Wind River Range. Don Muir, of course, was the guy who was the founder of Yosemite and a great conservationist in the latter part of the 19th and early 20th century. And this Finest Mitchell fellow was not the visionary that John Muir was, but he was quite the man when it came to this range of mountains in Wyoming. And they said that when he celebrated his 80th birthday by reclimbing all the peaks in Wyoming that were in excess of 12,000 feet, which was pretty darn good. Was I think 18 or 20 of them that he had done that year when he was 80. It said he was born in 1899, and so this was 1989. We didn't know whether he was still alive or not, and you couldn't tell. They didn't have a death date for him in the Sierra book, but we wondered. And so they also said that he had written his own book back in the 1940s called My Favorite Hikes, that he self-published and put out. And so of course, this is all before the internet and before Google and before Wikipedia, any of that we take for granted today. And so I called around and found a bookstore in Flagstaff, Arizona that had a couple copies of his book, and I ordered those and got them. Then a month later, my son Tom and I laid out the maps again with his book, and we came to a hiking place. It was the same place referred to in the Backpacker magazine from 2 months earlier, because it was one of his favorite hiking sites. And so as we were doing that, we wondered aloud, is this fellow, Mr. Mitchell, still alive or not? And so, we said it would really be nice to be able to be in touch with him, because he could really help us, know where to go and so forth. Well, this is, again, we had no idea where he lived or whether he was even alive. But I said, well, let's just make a pact that if he's alive, instead of us trying to find him, which we'll never do, that he'll meet us at the trailhead when we go out there, whenever that happens to be. And my son was young enough where his disbelief system had not been fully activated yet. And so he said, great idea, Dad, let's do that. And so anyway, we did that. We put our hands together and threw it up into the ether and let it go. And we didn't know when we were going to go. We didn't know really if we were going to go, but this was the plan, and so this became part of it. And so we ended up actually leaving Richmond, I think it was something like the 29th of July, after we determined that the first 2 weeks of August were the only reliably non-snow periods in the area where we were going to hike. And so we took off on a Saturday night at around 11 o'clock with me, my son Tom, my daughter Holly, and my then girlfriend named Lee, and her Bronco 2, overloaded and top heavy as it could be, with a roof rack on the top, and we drove straight through from Richmond at 11 Saturday night to Laramie on Monday morning, where we went to visit University of Wyoming, because my daughter was looking to transfer to a new college as far away from home as possible. And so we spent a morning there, and then that Monday night we had lined up to stay at a lodge in the southern portion of the Wind River Range, and we stayed there. And they put the hard sell on us. They said, this place, area around here is just as scenic and so forth as where you're going. Plus, we've got pack horses and guides and all sorts of wonderful stuff. And you'll have the time of your life if you just stay here and let us do it for you. And both my daughter and girlfriend were really wanted to do that. And I said, no, we can't do that, because Mr. Mitchell is going to meet us at the trailhead up at where we're going at Wind River Lakes, at Green River Lakes. And they were going, that's not really going to happen, blah, 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 blah. I said, so we left there, left that place, drove up, stopped in a little town called Pinedale, had lunch, got some provisions, And then we set out after lunch to go down to the trail place, which was a few miles up the paved road and then about 30 miles down the dirt road. And so as we were leaving the place in the morning, though, my son Tom turned to me and says, "Dad, you really think Mr. Mitchell's going to be there?" And I said, "Of course he is." And he says, "I hope so, because if he's not, the girls are going to be really mad." So I said, "Don't worry, he's going to be there. That's what we planned. It's going to happen." And so anyway, we meandered around, and of course, we didn't have a schedule, because the schedule, in terms of Mr. Mitchell, because the schedule was whenever we got there, he was going to be there. So he was on our schedule. And so when we finally got down to the trailhead around 3:30 in the afternoon, there was an open field there. I went back in 2015 with my younger daughter, Victoria, and it's much more organized now and not nearly as free form as it was in the earlier years. And in the field was one vehicle, only one vehicle in the whole place, and it was an old beat up GMC Suburban. We pulled up right next to it. There was an older fellow sitting in the driver's seat. And Tom says, "You think that's Mr. Mitchell?" I said, "I'm going to find out right now." So I got out of the car, walked around. This fellow rolled his window down. I said, "How you doing, sir? My name's Tom Coates." He says, "Finest Mitchell, and I'm pleased to make your acquaintance." So, and you know, we had, that really was, I mean, we had a wonderful 12 or 13-day backpacking trip, but it didn't get any better than that first moment, you know. And in fact, he lived 175 or so miles away, and he was on a walker. He was 89 years old, getting ready to turn 90, and he could barely move around at all, but only with the aid of a walker. And he said, "Well, I got here about 20 minutes ago, and I was going to pull out in the next 5 minutes if you all hadn't pulled up." He ended up spending the night, and he ended up rewriting our hike, you know, telling us which of the glacial lakes that we would encounter had fish stocked that he had stocked in the 1920s and so forth, in the 1930s. And in fact, I don't know if we could have survived without him, because we had not brought enough food to carry us as long as we were going to be there, planning to catch fish, you know, in the lakes on the way, in which we did, thanks to him. And so it was a wonderful experience. And I said, "Sir, what is it that brought you up here today?" And he says, "Well, you know," he says, "this is one of my favorite places, this spot on planet Earth." And he says, "I just woke up this morning, and I told my wife, I've got to go up to Green River Lakes one more time before I die, and this is going to be the day I do that. I don't know why, but this is the day I'm going to do that." And so it's amazing what intention and allowing and knowing how the system works can do and will do. And this is just another example of it. It doesn't have to be hard. I don't like things that are hard, you know, and but you know, there's nothing wrong with hard work, but it doesn't, you know, a lot of things that we can get without a lot of hard work.
Does it work with the lottery?
You know, we have a lot of issues around things like that. People can. I know people who make their living by winning lotteries by remote viewing the winning number after the number's been picked and is published in the newspaper, and then going and buying the ticket for that number. And you can I mean, that's a easily doable thing if you know how to remote view and you have confidence in what you're doing. Remote viewing is notoriously difficult for fine detail. Even most accomplished remote viewers have a hard time with numbers and so forth, but there are some who are good enough to do it the way I just mentioned. And I suppose You could do it the other way too, without picking the number. Just have if you had the sufficient confidence that this is going to be the number, then you actually could influence what the number would be in that way. Am I being heard all right on the microphone? Is that okay? There's one more I wanted to mention. Was a small one. There's involved my daughter, Holly, who is now got 3 children and one in college and so forth. Her first child was being born in the summer of 2002, and she came into my office, I think it was around the 20th of June of that year, one afternoon, right at 5 o'clock, looking frustrated and angry, and just stormed in and said, "Dad, I need to talk to you." And I said, "Okay." And so I said, "What's going on?" She said, "I just came from my OBGYN's office, and I've been told that this baby, I'm not dilating the way I'm supposed to be, and the baby had previously scheduled to come on the 7th or so of July, and now the doctor's telling me that that's not possible to happen, and that the baby, they're going to have they're scheduling me to come in on the 18th of July to have labor induced, and I don't want to wait that long, and I'm just don't know what to do, and so she also said that the doctors had told her that by the way, the doctor was going to be on vacation from July 3rd until July 10th. And so, but it wouldn't matter because there's no way the baby was going to be born during that time. And so I said, well, is it more important for you to have your baby delivered by the doctor you've been working with these last 8.5 months, or would you rather have the baby on the schedule like you previously had thought you were going to have? And she said, "I don't care whether the doctor's on vacation or not. There's plenty of other doctors in her group, and any one of them can take care of it as far as I'm concerned. I want to have this baby on schedule." And so I said, "Well, okay, that doesn't sound like a problem." She said, "Well, what do I do?" I said, "Well, I want you to pick a date that you want to have the baby." And she says, "Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Oh, great." I said, "What date should I pick?" I said, "Well, it's your baby, not mine, you know." And so she said, "Well, now that you've given me this choice, I don't know what choice to make." And I said, "Well, can you help me?" And I said, "Well, it's really your choice, but you know, we need to make sure it's okay with the baby too." And so I said, "Let's ask and see if we get what seems like a yes response on adjusting the date." And we did that, and we got what seemed like a yes response. And so I said, "Well, if you don't know what date it would be, I can tell you that from the standpoint of an aging grandfather, this being my first grandchild that was on the way, July 4th would be a really easy date to remember in case I get forgetful as time goes by." And so, and she says, "Oh, wow, that would be a great idea, July 4th, yeah." And so I said, "Okay, well, that's it then." She says, "Well, what do we do?" I said, we just did it, I thought. We just picked the date of July 4th. And she said, "Oh," well, she said, "Do we need to do any kind of ritual?" I said, "Well, we can put our hands together here on the desk and announce that it's going to be July 4th and make sure that's okay with the baby." And we did that. And I said, "We're going to also, while we're at it, we'll announce that this is going to be with minimum issues. There's not going to be any difficult labor. There's not going to be any difficulty with dilation. You're not going to need have any pitocin drip or anything like that to induce the labor. And it's going to be easy, and coming through on the morning of July 4th." And so we put our hands together, and we said, you know, like Captain Picard, "Make it so," you know. And so we threw our hands up and let it go. I said, it's done now. Just relax and know what's going to happen, and you don't need to call me back or even worry about it. Just call me on the evening of the 3rd when you start having contractions every 60 to 90 seconds, and you're on the way to the hospital. And so I didn't hear from her again until about 6:30, 7 o'clock on the evening of July 3rd. She says, Dad, the contractions are coming every 60 seconds. We're on the way to St. Mary's Hospital now. Come on over when you feel like it. And so I said, great. And I went on over a couple hours later, and her first child was born around 7 a.m. on the morning of July 4th with no issues whatsoever, no difficult labor, no nothing. And so again, it's just another simple example of how we, we don't. And when she left the office, she'd gone from this state of dejection and frustration and anger to being completely relaxed and light. She says, thank you, Dad. I knew you'd come up with something like this. And she didn't know what it was. And so, but again, the framework is allowing things to be the way they are and knowing how they are. I'm going to tell one more little story, and it involved what's that?
We have a question on the chat.
Oh, sure.
Somebody wants to know if they can ask questions via chat at some point.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. And if there's questions that come up during, I don't want to interrupt the flow with so much, but if the questions that come up during it, I'm happy to take them on as they come. One more story, then we'll move into the business of the day. But I'm telling these stories because they do relate to frameworks, and I hope you'll see some of that. About 31 or 2 years ago, I did a week-long gateway voyage program at the Monroe Institute. I had first encountered Bob Monroe 15 or so years earlier when he bought the property the Monroe Institute is situated on, and immediately thought he was a terrific fellow and all that. He was the first person I ever knew other than I who had out-of-body experiences, and so I was a convert right away. I didn't feel a need immediately to go up and start doing his programs, but I did that finally in 90 or 91, and when I got there, and the program would start on a Saturday afternoon and go through the following Friday. It was a week-long thing. In those days, they'd take your watch away. They didn't have a cell phone to take away, but they were taking away increments of being in the 3D world. And they had everybody staying in separate rooms, and in the room, their rooms, of course, had doors just like a hotel room, and in the rooms were boxes with beds in them, which they called check units. Bob was an engineer, so he had all sorts of nomenclature that was important to him. Check was an acronym, CHEC, for something or other. I can't remember what. And the procedure was that as the program got underway, Bob would meet on a Saturday night after everybody was there, after supper, in a room and sort of have a meet and greet where he would sit in a chair and everybody would sit around and introduce themselves, and he would tell a little bit about the history of the Monroe Institute and so forth. And so he did that. We had 23 or 4 people, as I recall. They were a really wonderful group of people from all over the world. We had 2 people from Switzerland. We had one of whom has been a friend of mine ever since, and we had a woman from Paris who had come there who was a total empath. She'd walk through a room, hear everybody's thoughts and so forth, and she was coming there to learn how, if she could, to buffer her intake. And we had a woman who came all the way from Auckland, New Zealand, and that woman is the subject of this story. That first night, this woman, her name was Helen, and she was, I think, 79 years old at the time, very diminutive woman, but with a powerful personality. And she was, like my late wife, she was a medical research scientist with a PhD in something like physical biochemistry. She was from Zurich, Switzerland, and had gone to New Zealand when after she got her PhD. And she told the tale that to Bob that night that she had been, as a child, that she had access to heaven whenever she wanted it. She could visit the heavenly realms and so forth. And then her parents, from her standpoint, had drilled it out of her. It just happened to coincide with the onset of puberty, but she never linked those two things together. And that she had been searching to regain her connection to heaven all of her life and had not been able to find it. And she says, "You're my last stop, Bob. I've been all over. I've been to yogis in India and shamans in South America, and I've done this and that and the other. I've climbed mountains, and nothing has helped me. And I came all the way from New Zealand for this week so you can save me." And this dark cloud came down over Bob. He said, "Oh, great," And so, and as this was being said, a voice came on in my head, which said, "Helen is your gift for this week." And I don't know why, but it came through that way. So I kind of watched and waited, and the way the programs work up there is you go to you have facilitators that help the group, and you meet with them, and then you go off to your room and get in the box with a bed in it with a headset, and you listen to a tape that's what they call hemisync, that has a binaural beat that's supposed to help get you into an alpha state of consciousness, and the idea is to help induce you to have out-of-body experiences over the period of the week, and it builds from one level to another level as it goes on, and then these tape sessions last 45 minutes or so, and then you come back down to meet with the facilitators, and they sort of do a debriefing, and everybody sits around in a circle on pillows on the floor. And they may have upgraded to chairs now, I don't know, but then that's what they did. And then they would, once the debriefing was completed, they would tell you what the next experience was going to be and give you sort of a broad brush outline. And you would do that twice in the morning, twice in the afternoon, and twice in the evening. So you have basically six sections a day, and debriefings to go with them. And so these sessions, these debriefings became more and more challenging because of Helen's whiny, complaining personality and so forth, because she wasn't having an experience. And so as people would try to tell what had happened if they chose to do so, and many did, Helen would say, "Why are you having something happen and I'm not?" And this would go on and on and on and on and on to ad nauseum every time we would go up and back and so forth. And so it became quite old pretty fast. And by Tuesday evening, the first session of Tuesday evening, one of our members, who was a wonderful guy who was a Russian emigre to the United States, who was a psychiatrist who practiced in Tampa, as I recall, he was very serious, like so many of the Russian people are, about making sure this thing was right, and he was more and more fatigued with Helen's interference and whininess. And as Helen started to interfere that time, he just about exploded and sprang across the floor to strangle her. That was in his mind, that's what he wanted to do, even though he didn't physically do it. And so he shouted Helen down, but anyway, and obviously she was very hurt, but he just was worn out with her antics, and so I thought it came then, now's the time to intervene with Helen. And so when we went back to the next journey, I put on the headphone. Now, let me explain the layout. Many of you have probably been to the premises of the Monroe Institute. There's a building with a tower at the end of it. And then it's a long building, and there's some bedrooms on the tower, and there's also some along a long corridor that is separated from the tower by one fire door, maybe two. And I was at the top of the tower. Helen was at the far end of this hallway away from me, so and separated by her bunk or bed, which was in a box, the door into her room, 100 feet of corridor, a fire door, and then 2 stories up into this tower, and then my bed and so forth. So even if I had shouted at the top of my lungs, I couldn't have been heard by Helen, from where I was and where she was. When I got into the room and in the bed and put the headset on and Bob started talking, I started talking. I was hearing it in the background, but I started whispering to Helen, as if I were whispering in her ear. I identified myself as a friend who had come to help her get what she came for, to take her to the light so that she would have the experience, reenact the experiences she'd had as a child, and it would give her the mechanism for continuing to have that experience going forward. And the entire 45 minutes of the tape, I was speaking to Helen and leading her from where she was and her consciousness to the point to the light and to the heaven realms that she wanted to visit and so forth, and it led her and it got her there, and then told her, look around, you can connect with the beings here, you can connect with, you can do all these wonderful things, and you never need to be blocked from this access again. All you need to do is remember my voice, and you can go there anytime you want. And as the tape started to wind down, I was using the cadence of Bob's voice, but Bob's voice was in the background. And so then I said, okay, it's time for us to go back, but know that you can always come back to this place in the same way that you used to as a child. And so we came back, and from my perspective, I was doing this. I didn't know what the outcome was going to be, but I did it from the standpoint of a sense of knowing that that I was connecting with this woman named Helen from Auckland, New Zealand. And when we went back downstairs, people were going around the room, and they used the usual debriefing. And in that room, the Russian psychiatrist was at if the facilitators were midnight, the Russian psychiatrist, and they were going from there right around counterclockwise around the room. The Russian psychiatrist was around 10 o'clock. Helen was around 4 o'clock, and I was in between. And so as the people started going around, the Russian psychiatrist, Helen was not saying anything, and the Russian psychiatrist, after several people were able to speak without being interrupted by Helen, the Russian psychiatrist couldn't stand the silence and said, "Helen, what's the matter?" And Helen's eyes got big as saucers, and she says, "Something happened. An angel visited me and took me to the light." And she had heard every word I had spoken. She had no idea it was me, and she described the experience exactly as it had been spoken to her, and that she had followed it and gone there and been there, and she says, "I got what I came here for. I got it." So, and I never told Helen. Everybody else was excited because they knew Helen would not be interrupting anymore, and she was not. And but Helen did. We had an interesting little side venue on that. Helen was drawn to me, even though she did not recognize my voice as the voice that was talking, to her and taking her to that heaven-like realm. And so she would. I at that time I was still a smoker, and I would hang out in the smoking area at night after all the stuff was over. Helen would come and hang out with me and so forth. And so on Wednesday night, Helen said, "Tom, I know that you know what my problem has been all this time, and for some reason I know you know, but will you tell me what it is?" And I said, "Well, I do know what your problem has been, Helen, as a matter of fact. And I will tell you, but I will tell you tomorrow night at midnight." And so she says, oh, okay, fine. And so I said, "Now," so the following night we were there in the smoking area, and it got down. It finally got to midnight, and she says, "Okay, you can tell me now." I said, "Now, Helen, I want you to know that what I'm about to tell you comes from a place of love. It's not intended to be anything else. But I want you to be solidly seated so you won't have a reaction." And she says, "Okay, tell me." And I said, "Helen, there's only one problem that you've ever had, and that is you're too full of shit." And said, "You're getting in your own way. That's all it is. That's all it's ever been." And her eyes got big, and she says, "You're right. You're right." And the next morning, and she was so happy. She says, "Oh, this is even better than what I got last night, Tuesday night." And she said, the next morning as we were having the final breakfast, Bob and Roe was there, and she says, she went up to Bob. She says, "Oh, Bob, I'm so excited. This has been the most wonderful week of my life. I got back to heaven and so forth like I came for." And she says, "And last night, Tom told me what my problem had been all along, and he was right." And Bob said, "Oh, wonderful. Well, what was it?" She says, "He told me I was too full of S-H-I-T." And I never ever told Helen, I never told anyone else in the group how that whole thing had happened. I did tell Bob Monroe about it after everybody else had left, and it became something of like an urban legend at the Monroe Institute. But again, it's a question of framework, of knowing how things work, being able to connect. We can do that all the time. We do that all the time, whether we're conscious of it or not. And so if we can bring a level of intention and a level of consciousness and be able to pick the moment, we can have all sorts of wonderful things happen. Now let's move on to the pictures that you've got on the screen. Well, to put those things on the screen, Dan.
So, you want the PDF or the pictures?
Well, the PDF, I guess, yeah. It says Dad's document because I had to enlist my daughter to. No, let's move it. Let's have the whole thing. Can we get the whole? I don't. You, all right. Well, while Dan is trying to get the picture up, let me just give you some background here. As again I've mentioned already, I have worked with channels for many years on a regular basis, and some wonderful things have come from that. And I've also all my life been blessed to have direct connections with Spirit myself. And is anything going on?
No,
Okay. All right. And in the flyer for today, we talked. There was talk about the raw materials and the law of one. That law of one, which was downloaded to us as humans through Carla Rueckert and Don Elkins and Jim McCarty. Only Jim McCarty is alive today, and he has been a speaker for us in the past. Jim McCarty has, and will be a speaker for our group in July of 2022. But the law of one materials have been and still stand alone as some of the most complete cosmologies that have ever been given to humanity. And one of the things that I've always been fascinated by with the law of one is that the Ra group, which builds itself as a mid-level 6 density group, which density is a term they introduced in the law of one channelings back in the early 80s. And a density is a frequency of consciousness. The higher the density, the higher the frequency, the more expansive the consciousness. Humans have been in the third, what Rob refers to as the third density, moving towards fourth. The planet itself has crossed into fourth as of now, planet Earth. Humans, there are many humans who also have crossed that threshold. There are many humans who unfortunately have not, but it's there for us. In any event, the Ra, one thing I always found fascinating about the Ra information was that the Ra themselves indicated that they beyond what they've told us in terms of what is beyond their boundaries, they don't know anything about it. They say these frequencies that they refer to as densities 1 through 7 are within what they refer to as an octave of consciousness. Now, our entire creation is an octave of consciousness, and in fact, it's more. There are many other octaves within our creation, which the Ra say they don't have any clue about. So in the last year, starting, I will say, in the first quarter, one of the channels I have worked with in recent years, in addition to the one I've worked with for 16 years now, Victoria Antonic, but Tom Ariel, who gave me permission to use his name today, which is a new step for him. He's become a really fabulous channel, and Tom was a corporate guy at Capital One, and suddenly his life started unraveling back in 2015. He started spontaneously channeling Pleiadians and so forth. His wife went from being a fundamentalist Baptist to being an Orthodox Hasidic Jew. They both had a transformation experiences. The marriage didn't survive those different pathways that they took, but he has over time developed into a spectacular world-class channel for most anything that. Many channels have one particular entity or group that they will bring in. Tom can tune into just about anything, and so it's really interesting what can come through with him. And earlier this year, he had an experience that he shared with another friend of both of ours, named Ryan Chappell, who's going to be a speaker for us in March, I think. And it was something to do with what they pegged it at the time was something called an angelic realm. It's been since renamed, but that was passed around. And then I started later in the year. I say that I'm mentioning that because these threads have sort of gathered together over time, and each one has led to the next thing. And so, and this is I mention it too because this has kind of been the story of my whole life, of one thing leading to another, and all of it seeming like a a patchwork quilt that was all connected. And so later, a couple of months later, I started having experiences of connection with a being that was described as another aspect or another expression of my own being, the underlying soul or whatever, a number of octaves above the one we're in, supposedly. And I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting, because that's something that the Ra have said consistently they can't get access to. And so I started, muddling around with that, and then the next thing that came through was just October 8th, and I was awakened about 4:30 in the morning, and directed to draw something. And what I drew was the rudimentary form of this just on a legal pad and just a hand circle, just to get the information down, and then it had more circles than this. If you expanded any one of these smaller circles in the middle to be bounded by the one that has the colorized writing in it, that's what it was. And then in subsequent work with Tom, and we have come up with more detail and the information that is in terms of detail, both in terms of how the system works and also in terms of nomenclature. And so what we have is, let me see if I've got a high technology implement here. Yes, laser pointer. High for me anyway. And the batteries are not dead, so that's pretty good too.
That's good for this room.
Right. Oh, okay, so it can't be seen on Zoom. I'm sorry. Well, anyway, this diagram, this picture is on Zoom though, is that right? Okay, all right. What we have here is a diagram that has various layers. The layer of the small circles in the middle, any one of those is a universe like this one. And Dan, can you move to the other picture? Okay. And can we make that bigger so it can be more easily read? Great, right there. Can you all see that? This diagram here depicts everything in creation that we know about. Everything in the raw materials is right here, and everything in any channel information I've ever heard of is right here. Whether it's the Michael teachings or any other channel source before now is limited to this thing. In the purple or the violet, however, whatever proper color it is what we call universes of creation. It's plural because what the information we got was that it's not that there are many universes that are not parallels of each other. They're not alternates of each other. They're completely separate from each other. And then within that, we have densities, octaves, dimensions, which you hear, this 10th dimension and all this stuff, frequencies, forms, planes, spirits, souls, physical expression, manifestation, probabilities, parallels, evolving consciousness and beingness, all states and stages of consciousness. Everything within any Hindu teaching you ever heard or any Buddhist teaching you ever heard of is all in this framework, including the law of one. All the octaves are in here. And then this on the outside is what we've referred to as scrims. That was a channeled description we got. A scrim for those who are not theater oriented, is like a curtain in a theater it's like cheesecloth that light can come through it. You can paint on it and so forth. So it's the word is used to depict the sort of dynamic quality of this whole thing. Now these words that are used, mind, Brahman, Tao, all that is, I am, / I am who I am what I am that I am. These were the words that we were given that were the 5 most acceptable terms for what is most commonly referred to as God. And so interestingly enough, we went through a whole menu of words to get to these, and there were a number, about 20 or so, that were acceptable, but these were the most acceptable, and these are listed in ascending order of preference. So the least preferable is mind. The next least is Brahman. The next least is Tao. The next least is all that is. And the final one, I am / I am who I am that I am, that is the term that is most preferred by the consciousness that we would call God. And interestingly enough, God, Yahweh, Allah were not on the acceptability list. They were strong no's. Creator was not acceptable. Ground of being was not acceptable. We didn't know at the time because ground of being would be later, would be outside of that. But it was very interesting that the reason that we got that I am who I am what I am is the most acceptable is because it's dynamic. It embodies the state of becoming. And it also connects us in ways because we are, as physical expressions, we are at the cutting edge of creation ourselves. And we are, we're like the name framework I was talking about earlier. There's always, it can be expansive, it can be constrictive, but it's whatever a person is much more than a name. Whatever being is, it's much more than the person, and this communicates the aspect of becoming in addition to being. But interestingly enough, we were told, and some of these channelings, by the way, have included the I am that I am presence as the source of the channeling. Okay, so we've been, it sounds a little hokey to say, well, we're having a conversation with God last night, because my own experience is if you go out into the ether and ask for God, like Neil Donald Walsh did back in the early 90s, you get a cacophony of voices saying, I'm God, it's all over the place, and they're not this, as far as I'm concerned. There are many spirits out there who are sufficiently elevated that they can give you good information. But so it's a confusing issue. But we got what seemed like that and what identified itself as that. It wasn't the only source. We got what started to come through was communications from the next layer. And so let's go back to the other one, if you will. And can we zoom? All right. Okay. What we got, this as we filled out this picture or this diagram, This next layer, which has the colorized writing, is what was referred to as the joyful realm of infinite imagination, infinite illumination, infinite creation. There was another terminology used too, I didn't have room for it, infinite beingness. And one of the things that's come through that's been interesting here is that we have been given by the various different sources, or at least they identify themselves as different sources, the concept of something called beingness, which is, according to the sources, an enlargement of what we have referred to historically as soul. And as far as we can tell, the placeholder word that would be equivalent, most equivalent to beingness in this context, is what we call spirit. You often have, soul and spirit, and there's in our common parlance, there is no easy distinction between those two concepts. What we've been told about soul is that, and versus beingness, is that if you imagine a concert violinist playing a violin piece, the violinist plus the violin plus the bow plus the audience, that's beingness, a multi-dimensional aspect. And that the sheet music from which the violin player is playing is soul. And so that which we would refer to as essence in the concept of soul is actually what we've been told in this framework is more properly referred to as beingness. And that there's the reason that the distinction they say is important is because the concept of beingness is so much grander within the whole scheme of things than we have ever imagined with respect to soul. And so that we're being invited to create a new language to describe this aspect. And so if you look at this circle, the concept of beingness originates both within the small circles and also at the level of the joyful realm of infinite imagination. But what is important here is that all of creation, all creations, all iterations or versions of all that is, of and so forth, are what are referred to as extrusions or extensions of this joyful realm of infinite imagination. And so, and what they tell us is that which we would typically call God, which they want us to call I am that I am, is not a being. And that's one reason that the nomenclature God is not acceptable, because God for us implies a supreme being of some kind. But this is not a being, it is a discrete consciousness. And it is a discrete consciousness that is formed by the collective of the joyful realm of infinite imagination for a creation, for a universe, and all its parallels and of time and space and so forth. Yes. You want to use a mic or?
No, I'm loud. Is it the quantum field?
Nobody on Zoom can hear you.
Oh, sorry, I forgot about that.
Can you repeat the question for her?
Check.
Well, she's going to come up.
Are you talking about the quantum field? Is that what the ground of all being is?
No.
Okay.
No. I'm not talking about the quantum field. I don't know. The answer is I don't know whether the ground of being is a quantum. Certainly, what we call a quantum field would be everything in creation of every dimension is from the ground of being. But what I gather is that the joyful realm of infinite imagination, etc., precedes all things like the quantum field. And we don't, I've labeled, we got origin on the outside, and I put my own nomenclature at the bottom, terra incognita, because we don't know anything about that. And whether we can know, I don't say we can't, because we've actually started getting information about it. Not about that itself, but about some of the rules that it's created. And so who's to say what also came through loud and clear was that two reasons the Ra don't have information beyond what the materials provide. And I should add here that the Ra information, the law of one cosmology, is not specific to the Ra themselves. This cosmology is used by groups of advanced consciousness across the entire Milky Way. It's the dominant cosmology of beings of way beyond where we are. What we got was that the part of the reason that the Ra don't go beyond it is because of their own internal self-programming. They believe that they can't go beyond it, so they can't. And if they could let go of those limiting beliefs, they would not be limited by them.
Does that mean they're full of shit?
Very possible. But I don't want to point it, make any accusations. But programming is what you might put in that category. Any kind of programming, which is going to be limiting.
Somebody's asking what is Ra?
The Ra is a group that was channeled starting in 1980 by a group that included the primary channel was a woman named Carla Rueckert. And then there was two other people, Don Elkins, who died in the mid-'80s, in '84, and Jim McCarty. They were out in Kentucky, and by simply googling law of one or the Ra, R-A is the terminology, they can be found easily. And there's a group called LL Research, which stands for Love and Light, that Jim McCarty still runs, and you can access his website by googling LL Research or Jim McCarty. It's not McCarthy; it's MAMCCARTY. And
Hey, Tom.
huh?
You can also go to bring the number 4 and then th bringforth.org.
All right, so Martha said you can go to Bring Forth, B-R-I-N-G,
And then the number 4.
Bring For, T-H, yeah,
Forth.org.
.org, and also David Wilcock has a website that has done a very good job of summarizing the Ra information, the law of one information. But that's who they are. Interestingly enough, one of the primary speakers in the Ra transmissions was the speaker who identified himself as formerly being known on Earth as Buddha. And so it's a pretty high level group, way beyond humans at this time. And but interestingly enough, the fact that they're more advanced than we are in their consciousness and everything else doesn't mean that we can't get things that they don't have. And because this, as this illustrates, everything in creation is a download, if you will, of this infinite realm, which interpenetrates all of it, and we have access to that. Beingness is something that is created primarily in the context of a universe. And so what we got was that the second reason the Ra had not gotten the information was that all the Ra are beings of this creation. Their beingnesses were created within this creation, so they didn't have a memory of anything else. And we're told that 98, across the Milky Way anyway, that 98% of all sentient beings are animated by beingnesses that were created within the framework of this existing creation that we're part of now, which has been around by some estimates, 15 billion years plus or minus, and who knows how long it will be around. But we are told that before this one came into existence, there have been more predecessors than humans have the capacity to count, even with our most advanced computer, calculators. And so it sounds like a lot. And so in any event, when they said what came through was that there's about 98% of all across this creation are beings of this creation and beingnesses of this creation. And once this creation is completed, all the beingnesses will become part of the realm of infinite imagination, etc. And will then be there. They will be drawn upon for new universes, new creations, and some of us have been around since before this creation, and that's how it was. That's why we have memories of things that came before and things that go beyond. And interestingly enough, they told us that on Earth today, the percentage of beings that are animated by beingnesses that are beyond this creation in terms of origin is 9.5%, where across the Milky Way it's only 2%, and in the Ross case it's even less than that, and so it is, and that doesn't mean apparently it's because the Earth is in such trouble, and humanity is in such trouble, that a number have come here to try to rescue what sometimes is referred to as a human experiment on Earth, to see if it can be, brought onto a better path. Yes.
Quick question. Isn't the Milky Way part of this creation?
Yes, the whole universe is part of this creation. Right. The Milky Way is just a local galaxy. And it's not, I don't think anybody knows how many, there's 100 billion, trillion galaxies in this universe. It's big. Even though what we're told is that each one of these circles is a universe. It's not just a single universe, it's a universe in parallel universes, an alternate. Each one of them, including this one, no matter how big it is finite. It has boundaries. It's not infinite. And when this universe has completed its course of tens or hundreds of billions of years, however long it may be, the consciousness that is the I am that I am energy of this creation will return itself into the layer called the joyful realm. And because the reason that joyful aspect is there is because that apparently it's been downloaded to us as an energy beyond what we understand to be the purest form of love, or unconditional love. It is pure, and it's a word that we can understand because it's so uncomplicated. It's pure joy, period. And the love as we get it is a derivative of it, but it doesn't necessarily capture all of the flavor of joy, and that this is the intention of creation, is to bring all this in as joyful, to make it fun. We understand joy. Love is more complicated, and because we've made it that But,
There's a chat question.
huh?
There's a chat question. Can you say more about our role in creation, that is the role of each soul or being? 'Cause that's what you're talking about right now, right?
Role in creation is the role of Earth. Well, yeah. First, let's talk about in terms of soul. We talk about that. The the beingness, the role in creation. Beingness is the creator, and in the literal sense, and we as physical expressions of beingness or soul, however you want to call it, are expanding creation in every moment, every breath we take. That's what we signed up for. And I don't know. I haven't inquired here, but I know in the framework of the Michael teachings, whether it's right, wrong, or different, I don't know. But what the teaching is that by Michael's estimate, and it's a guesstimate more than anything else, they acknowledge they don't really know, that less than 5% of all beings or beingnesses have ever, within the framework of this creation, ever decided to manifest themselves in physical form. And so that gives you a flavor for, if that's even anywhere near right, for the fact that physical form and physical expression is not necessarily the norm, but it is the cutting edge of creation. That's what we are. We are the cutting edge of creation, and so the idea behind this is for us to being able to have a better idea of how magnificent we truly are, and the fact that we can connect with all levels of creation, at least up to this joyful realm, because all the beingnesses are of that, even if they were created within this creation, because they're of the mind of what we would call most commonly God, and so did Linda? I thought were you asking something?
I was about to. I think you just read my mind.
All right.
Are you speaking to the other circles within that joyful realm? I'm so curious to know what you have written in, like the gray one and the red one.
They're all the same.
Oh, they're
all the same. Each one of those has the same print as the one we looked on earlier. So they have this is just illustrative. This is just to show the flavor. These are just imagine this as a block of Swiss cheese, and each one of the holes is a universe with all the same potentials. But if they're not necessarily. But if I say they're the same potentials, but each universe that's in there would be different laws of physics, different this, different that. Although they all would be subject to they would all be extrusions of the joyful realm of infinite imagination, infinite illumination, infinite creation, infinite beingness, and infinite joy. They all come from that. Subject to that only, but everything else can be different. It could be, you could have a universe of molasses or whatever. I mean, I'm just using that to be funny, but Terry.
If Dan goes back to the picture we were just looking at, what I've been getting the entire time I've been watching it and hearing you talk.
Can you grab a mic or?
What I've been thinking of and imagining, the entire time I've been watching you talk and look at this, I keep seeing it as a cross-section of an artery.
Mm-hmm.
And those are all blood cells.
Right.
And that's what's circulating through the universe.
Right. Okay. Well, that's what medical training will get you. Yeah, but I mean, it is a good analogy. It is, a potentially useful analogy. But does that help you at all, Linda?
I was going somewhere different.
Okay. You want to?
I was just because I'm very attuned to color. I'm thinking, what is that gray circle mean? I was imputing something to the colors you chose.
The
the size. all
I'm
of
sure
that.
God had a hand in it, but they're randomly selected as far as I'm concerned. You know,
Okay.
they're just to illustrate that they're different. That's all.
Okay, got it.
Right. Different size, different shape. You know, but they're all universes of creation, of different creators, different creator consciousness, a different extrusion of the realm of infinite imagination. Right. Now we've gotten some. Let's see. We've had some visitations from some groups from this realm of infinite imagination, which is in theory a realm, beyond the I am that I am. And one visitor who called itself Tonka. Who knows whether it's Wana Tonka? Well, I don't know. But we got from Tonka what were described as the immutable principles of origin. Now, this is origin that I've labeled terra incognita, but these are principles of origin which are downloaded to creation. Number one is joy. That's number one, the most important of all. Immutable principle of everything. Number two is creation. It's continuous. Continuous. Number three is expansion. Continuous. These are fundamental principles. What's going on?
I think your vest is rubbing on the wire or something.
I haven't done anything. Sounds like a drum going on.
It's this. See this? That's that. That's your heart? Wow.
I think we're being visited by some other consciousness. I think that's what's trying to get our attention here. Where is Tom Arrow when I really need him? Anyway, we also got from the joyful realm we got what we call five fundamentals of creation. The first one of those is joy. The second one is autonomy, within which comes the concept of free will and so forth. The third one is, and this is what we were told is the least understood and least exercised, is appreciation. Appreciation of everything, not just gratitude, but appreciation being described to us as having a higher vibration than the concept of gratitude as such. The fourth one is geometry. In other words, everything is everything is like a crystal, and so forth. As I've mentioned in the past, in the early stages of my 16-year and continuing channeling saga with my friend Victoria Antonic, I was exploring what souls looked like, and would be given a visual, and every soul would have its own geometric shape, like a snowflake, and so geometry is it's a fundamental of creation, and the fifth one is the most surprising. It's not sound, it's music. Music. And so and they say there could be other, if we wanted this from the standpoint of physics, we'd get something different. But these are the operating fundamentals that we were given. Joy, autonomy, appreciation, geometry, and music. Night before last, I got a text from again from Tom. It says I've just been notified that I'm supposed to come to your house and have a session to help you get ready for Saturday's talk. This is about 8:30. I'm in a corporate board meeting on Zoom, and so I said, all right, I'll finish up here at 9. Come on over. And so he came over, and we had visits from 3 different entities. One being my own higher self or inner being, whatever it should be called, to tell me about all my adventures with extraterrestrials. And that was fun, and then the other had one. The second one was from Abraham, which it gave some wonderful information about everybody. The love train thing. We ought to all, everybody get together and love one another. Right now, it was a Buffalo Springfield, I guess, not love train, but. Okay, all right. And thank you. And to put it in proper historical context, Jose Feliciano. And so, and then we had a visit from the group that's come several times now, from the Joyful Realm. And I have to say, this group is really, really special. They call themselves the Quintet. And not the 5. They said, nope, it's got to be the quintet, because the quintet suggests the lyrical, musical quality of the message of what we are and the message we bring you. And when the quintet comes in, it literally is like having a warm, moist blanket wrapped around you. It feels like, healing balm. It's really, really something. The quintet, the most significant part of the message they brought in night before last was angels are real, and they're very powerful beings, and they're highly underutilized. And it's sort of like, what was the old commercial, the so-and-so repairman, what was the appliance company? The Maytag repairman is sitting around all day with nothing to do because the Maytags never break down. Yeah, that's what it was. And the image that came up was like that. And that if people would call on angels to help them, the angels will queue up like in an instant because there's so much that they are there to provide, and they don't have enough. They have more slack time than they know what to do with, and so I thought that was it was special for me, because I'm not someone who has ever gone around with much of a sense about an angelic presences and so forth. Because I think I didn't react well to religion as a child, but all this that we've come to would confirm that the angelic realm, even this infinite realm of imagination, is what was initially referred to as the angelic realm, and there are beings that would be properly referred to as angels that are there for us to. I mean, I have no doubt there was some angel that was helping me connect with Finest Mitchell, right? Some that was helping my daughter Holly have her baby right on the day that she picked. Some angel that was helping me connect with Helen from Auckland, New Zealand, to help her out. These things are real presences, and all we have to do is ask, and they're there for us. They're there for us. For everybody, no matter who you are. Any questions on this little bit of information we've had so far? No questions? Oh, it's good. You got it all down. Okay, I want to move on. Leave this up, Dan, but I want to tell you a couple of magical things that have happened in the aftermath of this information, because all this stuff is they're like building blocks, you know. And the Friday before Thanksgiving, there's a woman in town named Ruth Perkinson in Richmond. She is a magical being, and she is somebody I've gone to a couple of times, and never fails to bring magic into the spectrum in ways that are far beyond my understanding. And I had a session with her. I had a session with her in early September. I was getting ready to take off and go on a road trip across the country and back. And I had a wonderful time. The 3D excuse for the trip was to visit my daughter in Denver and my son and daughter-in-law and grandchildren in Marin County, California. The real reason, from my perspective, was to be like a combination of Tinkerbell and Don Quixote, you know, tilting at windmills and spreading fairy dust across the landscape. Literally, it felt to me, I drove across almost without turning on my radio. I was singing or humming or toning my way across the United States intentionally, with the intention of spreading love and light across the landscape. That was the journey. I went to several waypoints where I did some shamanic work. I stopped at one place that's a natural preserve in the University of Kentucky at Lexington. I had one of my bowls there, you know, I was doing the bowl and people were walking by. They didn't even see me. I was like in another dimension. It was really amazing. And I went to a place in Wyoming, another place in Kansas doing drumming and so forth. But it was really for me, a wonderful and regenerative journey. And so I had a session with my friend Ruth. Before that, she's a blind lesbian energy worker, and I think I'll name that because I think you have to be all those things to bring in the kind of magic she brings in. I don't know how, at least in the way she does it. And I met with her the Friday before Thanksgiving. Just to see her. I didn't have any expectations, but I sat down. She's going around and sometimes she puts her hand on your shoulders, but you're just there. All of a sudden, I had an experience I've never had in my life. I literally had the physical, energized fullness of the consciousness of I am that I am, fully embodying my presence. It reduced, I can't even bring it up now, but it reduced me to just weeping. It was just so overwhelmingly powerful. There was also a conversation that went on with it where it said, we know you're shy about expressing this, even though that's what you're here for. And one way to start is with hugs, because you know whenever you hug another being, whenever two beings hug, it's I am that I am hugging itself. That's all it is. That's all it ever was. And so and they said also know this, that the more that if this energy can be embodied, any condition, any defect, anything that's broken can be fixed, can be healed, can be made whole. This is this is the energy of creation itself that you're feeling right now. I can't even speak it without getting emotional at this point, but it was really supremely powerful. And what was very, very clear was it's available to us all the time. It's there for us. I don't feel I'm embodying it all the time, but we are that. We are that stuff. and whether we know it or not. And the more we can open ourselves to that reality, the more we will experience it, and the more real it will become. That took this framework, this intellectual framework, which was downloaded and so forth, that took it and brought it into a level of physical reality in a sense that I'd never anticipated, never experienced in my life. Not long after that, just after Thanksgiving, I encountered a person in my life that made it 3D reality on a day-to-day basis. That extraterrestrial person that I referred to in the sitting to my right here, and so all these things, all these connections are of a piece. They're not disconnected, and perhaps I feel that I've been blessed my entire life by being at what Ken Ring, this psychologist up at University of Connecticut, who wrote a wonderful series of books in the late 80s and early 90s, into the 90s, called the Omega series. He coined the term experiencer, and I've been an experiencer since I was about 3 years old. Have been connecting with Pleiadians and beings from other places that we don't have names for since I was about that age, and also have had just a whole life of wonderful experiences. Only thing that I know of that's maybe a little bit different for me than the average person is that I thought these experiences were important, so I did not disregard them. I did not discount them. I did not disclaim them. I did not forget them. They've all been assembled at all times in my. I thought they were the most important things in my life. These crazy things that we're taught are crazy, and we're taught not to pay heed to, and so I'm delighted that I can be almost an octogenarian, and all this crazy stuff is still happening. I just love it. And it's available for all of us, all the time, and so that's why I said at the beginning that it's all a big love story. That's all it is, and I wanted to since there are no questions, we all got it down here, but I mean I'll be glad to take any questions you might have in the room or on Zoom, either one. I know we're running out of time. Let's see. I wanted to close with if I can find it. Maybe I can. Maybe I can't. Let's see. Well, I guess that's not too big. Wait a minute, hold on. Oh, here it is. I want to with reading something that I had that I channeled myself from my guides or angels or whoever back in January 11th, 1992. And this is not new to many of you, but it embodies what I think is the whole thing we're talking about today. The question I presented as I went to bed one night was, what is love? Please give me an answer. I'd like a concise answer that I can use in any context. And I had already tried through a writing exercise for a couple of days to come up with an answer myself, and nothing I came up with was coherent. So at 3:30 in the morning, I was awakened by my guides and told to get a pencil and paper and write down what they had to say word for word, that this was the answer to my question. And so here it is. And this is a piece of paper that has what is love at the top. And here's the answer. Most people think that love is good and that bad things like hate, fear, anger, envy, greed, deceit, etc. are the opposites of love or evidence of its absence. They are neither, however. The truth is, love has no opposite and is never absent. Love, like life itself, is simply all that is, nothing more, nothing less. Those chimeras some call love's opposites are only love's masks and mirrors to souls as yet unawakened to its true nature and their own. Each of love's supposed opposites can be defined, but who can define love? No one, because, like consciousness, love defines us. We do not define it. Love is the perfect unison within all apparent polarities and guides us in all we do and are, even as we least suspect it. Love enables us to recreate and relive past patterns and to relinquish and transcend those patterns when we are finally prepared to accept and embrace the fullness of the present. Love is at once ubiquitous and inescapable, and it nurtures and sustains us in infinite unseen ways that always exceed the wildest of our expectations, the clearest of our perceptions, the profoundest of our judgments. Love cannot and never will be captured by the words of any language we conjure or create to describe or limit it, even by calling it good. More intriguing, more compelling, and to some more baffling than the greatest detective story ever told, love at every moment offers at our fingertips clues of its imminent caress, just as cosmologists have discovered the quintessential nature of time is translinear. The essence of love, once discovered, is transpolar and omnipresent. The more we knowingly experience love's seamless tapestry in our lives, the more wonderfully mysterious its intricate and elegant handiwork becomes. Love is, beneath all, the deepest mystery of who we are and all that is, and one we shall never fully unravel, no matter how much the light the windows of our awareness may shed upon it. Hail to the mystery. So,
Thank you, Tom. We have a request that you send that to the members.
all right, I'd be glad to do that. I'll be glad to send that out, and you mean the what is love or the picture?
What is love and the picture, sir?
All right, I'll be glad to send that out to the whole email list this coming week. Be delighted to do that. And I think that wraps us up. But I've got one more experiential aspect for this program. And for those on Zoom, if they can do it at home, if they have someone, I think we all need to get up and give some hugs in real time, right now. Okay? This is how we're closing. And know as you do this, the person you are hugging is I am that I am. Was it okay?
Beautiful. Beautiful. Love it. So great.
Namaste, everyone. Was that okay?
Yeah, fantastic. I love you.
Me too. Let's go hug some other people. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Oh, this.
I just hugged myself.
Oh, okay.
You can hug people properly.